In the United States, firms often seek incentives from municipal governments to expand those municipalities, okay? Basically, firms want incentives to do this. A team of political scientists hypothesized that municipalities are much more likely to respond to firms and offer incentives if expansions can be offered in time or announced in time to benefit local elected officials than if they can't. Okay, this is basically saying if the timing is before elections, possibly, then these expansions, if they're announced, they can benefit the elected officials, so they'll be more likely to do this. Okay, the team contacted officials in thousands of municipalities, inquiring about incentives for a firm looking to expand and indicating that the firm would announce its expansion on a date either just before or just after the next election. So which choice best describes data from the graph that weaken the team hypothesis? So let's look back. What's their hypothesis? It's basically that municipalities are much more likely to respond to firms and offer incentives if expansions can be announced in time to benefit elected officials. Okay, let's look at the answer choice. So for these graph questions, you have to first check if they're actually accurate, if it is shown on the graph and describes the graph accurately. And then second, you have to check if it actually does what the question is asking, like weaken the hypothesis. So number A is a large majority of municipalities that, okay, so we're looking for weakening. Okay, a large majority of municipalities that received an inquiry mentioning plans for announcement before the next election didn't respond to the inquiry. So basically, if they're saying before the next election, so it would benefit the elected officials, but they still didn't respond anyways, even if it would benefit them. So if this is true, this seems like it would weaken the team's hypothesis. So let's see if that's true. Mentioning plans for announcement before the next election. So that's this gray color over here. So that's here, no response. So number of municipalities, 1,200, no response. Okay, yeah, that seems like it would work. Let's look at number B. The proportion of municipalities that responded to the inquiry or offered incentives didn't substantially differ across announcement timing conditions. Yeah, let's check if that's accurate. So we can see that for both before and after the election, it's around like 1,200, right? So it is correct that it didn't substantially differ. So this is pretty good as well. Let's look at option C. Only around half the municipalities that respond to inquiries mentioning plans for announcement. Only around half the municipalities that responded to inquiries mentioning plans for announcement before the next election offered incentives. I think this is a little more than half because these are response to inquiry and these are offered incentives. This is not equal to half of these two are not halves, or they're not the same. So that's just wrong. So it doesn't correctly describe the graph. Of the municipalities that received an inquiry but mentioning plans for an announcement date after the next election, more than 1,200 didn't respond and only 100 offered incentives. Okay, if you look at the graph, you can see that's pretty accurate, right? But the problem with this one is that it does not weaken the team's hypothesis. This is exactly what the team is saying, exactly the team's hypothesis, right? So this one is also out of the picture. So now we have to decide between A and B. And I think to do that, let's look back at the team's hypothesis, right? They're saying municipalities are much more likely to respond to firms and offer incentives if expansions can be announced in time to benefit local elected officials than if they can't. Okay, that's the important part. This team is basically hypothesizing in time versus not in time. And they're saying there's going to be a significant difference between these two, right? That's their hypothesis. They're much more likely. That's a significant difference. So let's look back at A. A is just saying a large majority that received an inquiry mentioning plans for announcement before the next election didn't respond. Okay, that works. But again, looking back at the hypothesis, we're considering two things, right? We're considering in time versus not in time. So we should mention both parts. And we should also see that there's a significant difference between those parts, right? So if we look at B again with those new eyes about what this hypothesis is, we can see the proportion of municipalities that responded to the inquiry or offered initiative didn't substantially differ. We're in the hypothesis, they thought that it would substantially differ, but these guys are saying it's not really differing across announcement timing conditions. So this also tackles both in time versus not in time. So that's why option B is correct. It touches upon both, whether it's in time and not in time, and the significant difference aspect.